Imagine an airliner designed to compete not with other planes, but with the great ocean liners. But this vision would create a machine so colossal and misunderstood, it was doomed from its very first flight. It was called the Bristol Brabazon, born from a desperate post-war ambition. It was built to be Britain's flying flagship. In its vast fuselage, wider than a 747's, you'd find a cocktail bar, a 37-seat movie theater, and private sleeping cabins. It wasn't just transport. It was a statement of national pride, a declaration that Britain would dominate the jet age. So why did this magnificent, costly marvel end its days as scrap metal, having never carried a single paying passenger? The story begins not in peace, but in the shadow of war. By 1943, British planners faced an alarming truth. Their entire aircraft industry was geared toward bombers and fighters. For civilian airliners, they relied almost entirely on American imports. This dependence, they feared, would leave Britain economically and politically stranded once the fighting stopped. The war had forged powerful bonds with the United States, but it also exposed a deep vulnerability. British factories were churning out Spitfires and Lancasters with world-beating excellence, but the industrial art of crafting a modern, comfortable, and efficient airliner had atrophied. The only British civil aircraft of any significance in the pre-war years, like the de Havilland Albatross, were elegant but limited in range and capacity. The future of global air travel was clearly going to be transatlantic, a market for giants, and Britain had no giant in waiting. Their answer was a committee, led by the celebrated aviator Lord Brabazon. Its mission was to forecast a future of air travel and design the aircraft that would secure Britain's place in it. Their central belief, that the elite who once crossed the Atlantic by ship would demand the same opulence in the sky. The committee, a gathering of the nation's best aviation minds, politicians, and industry leaders, looked to the only model of long-distance luxury they knew, the Cunard and White Star ocean liners. Passengers on those voyages expected grand dining rooms, social promenades, private staterooms, and entertainment. The Brabazon Committee reasoned that these travelers, now moving to the air, would accept nothing less. Speed was secondary to ceremony. Efficiency was less important than elegance. The aircraft wouldn't merely fly. It would host, it would impress, it would embody an entire empire's confidence. They envisioned not just a plane, but a skyliner. And for the Bristol Aircraft Company, this call arrived at a perfect moment. Their design team had already been sketching giant long-range bomber concepts. These studies translated almost perfectly into a civilian blueprint, an aircraft with a staggering 230-foot wingspan and a fuselage so large it could hold 2 entire decks of luxury accommodations. Bristol's engineers, led by the brilliant Archibald Russell, had been working on a 100-ton bomber concept for the Air Ministry. The aerodynamic challenges of lifting such a mass, the structural puzzles of a vast wing, the sheer logistics of its construction, these were already on their drawing boards. So when the Brabazon Committee issued its specifications for the Type 1, a transatlantic airliner of unprecedented size and comfort, Bristol was uniquely poised. They didn't have to start from scratch. They simply pivoted their military behemoth into a civilian one, swapping bomb bays for ballrooms and gun turrets for galley kitchens. It seemed like a seamless, even inevitable, transition of wartime technology into peacetime prosperity. The government was convinced if Bristol was ordered to build it. In a time of immense national strain, with rationing still in effect, and cities in ruins from the Blitz, the British state committed a fortune to this audacious project. The logic was not purely commercial, it was geopolitical. A successful Brabazon would be a tangible symbol of recovery, a proof that British engineering could not only win wars, but shape the peace. It was a statement intended for Washington and Moscow as much as for London. The contract was signed, the funds allocated, and the immense weight of national expectations settled onto Bristol's factory at Filton. But constructing this behemoth meant facing challenges on an unprecedented scale. Their airfield at Filton was far too small. The solution: bulldoze an entire village to extend the runway to 8,000 feet, and erect the world's largest aircraft hangar just to house it. The tiny village of Charlton, with its church and homes, was sacrificed to the project, a stark early sign of the immense social and financial cost this aircraft would entail. The new hangar, a cathedral of industry, was a marvel in itself, yet it stood as a monument to a single, unproven machine. Every rivet, every control surface, was an exercise in pioneering engineering. They pioneered powered flight controls and a system to automatically counteract turbulence for passenger comfort. Because the control surfaces were so massive, no pilot could move them by muscle power alone. Bristol developed a fully powered, reversible control system, a technology that would later become standard on all large jets. They even experimented with a gust alleviation system, where a probe on the nose would detect incoming turbulence and automatically adjust the elevators to smooth the ride, a space-age concept in the piston engine era. The propulsion was another realm of breathtaking complexity. Instead of opting for fewer, more powerful engines, Bristol chose a configuration of 8 of their massive Centaurus radial engines. These 18-cylinder powerhouses were paired, with each pair driving a single set of massive counter-rotating propellers through a complex gearbox. This promised smoother, efficient power, but it also created a maintenance nightmare: 16 rows of cylinders and 8 intricate gearboxes to service. Every decision seemed to prioritize technical ambition over practical operation. The wing itself was a work of art, thick enough at the root for an engineer to walk through for inspections, its cavernous interior serving as integral fuel tanks to hold the 10,000 gallons needed to cross the Atlantic. The fuselage was a perfect circle, 25 feet across, offering a volume of space no airliner would match for decades. But as the plane slowly took shape, the world it was designed for was vanishing. The Brabazon Committee had made a critical and understandable miscalculation. They assumed the post-war travel market would be an extension of the pre-war one, small, wealthy, and obsessed with luxury. But the war itself had democratized flying. Hundreds of thousands of men pilots, navigators, radio operators, aircrew had experienced flight. The United States, with its vast industrial base untouched by bombing, was already planning for mass air travel. Aircraft like the Douglas DC-4 and the Lockheed Constellation were designed from the outset to carry more people farther, faster, and crucially, more cheaply. Their cabins were comfortable, even stylish, but they were not floating palaces. They were tools of commerce. While British planners imagined first-class passengers sipping champagne in a lounge, American Airlines were already sketching out economy-class sections for tourists and businessmen. The very foundation of the Brabazon's raison d'etre was crumbling even as its huge ribs were being riveted together. When the sole prototype, gleaming and majestic, finally took to the air in September 1949, the crowd hailed it as the Queen of the Skies. It flew beautifully stable, smooth, and dignified. Pilots reported it handled like a much smaller aircraft, a testament to its advanced control systems. The press and public were enthralled. It performed flawless flypasts at the Farnborough Air Show, a majestic, slow-moving testament to British ambition. Yet beneath the applause, a cold reality was setting in. Airlines, especially Britain's own BOAC, were growing deeply skeptical. BOAC's pilots and engineers, who were consulted during development, had seen the numbers. They understood the operational calculus. The plane was a white elephant in the most literal sense, incredibly expensive to feed and maintain, with no clear commercial purpose. The problem was simple and fatal. The Brabazon was a luxury yacht in an age that suddenly demanded container ships. It could carry, at most, 100 pampered passengers across the Atlantic. But American rivals like the Lockheed Constellation could carry nearly as many, far more cheaply and almost as fast. The economics made no sense. To break even, a ticket on the Brabazon would have to be astronomically expensive, pricing out even the wealthy elite. Meanwhile, the Constellation could turn a profit while offering more affordable fares. The Brabazon's vast interior space was its most touted feature and its greatest flaw. All that empty volume meant more weight to lift, more drag to overcome, more fuel to burn. It was an aerodynamic penalty paid for luxury few were willing to fund. BOAC executives, faced with the hard task of running a profitable national airline in a competitive market, quietly but firmly decided they did not want it. Without the home carrier's commitment, the project was a ghost ship. It was a masterpiece of engineering and a disaster of commerce. Every innovative system, every painstakingly machined part, every ounce of ingenuity poured into the Brabazon only made it a more perfect solution to a problem that no longer existed. It was the right plane at the absolute wrong time, in a different timeline, where luxury air travel remained the exclusive domain of the ultra-wealthy for another 2 decades. The Brabazon might have found a niche. But in our timeline, the jet age was just around the corner, promising even faster travel for the masses, rendering the Brabazon's ponderous, opulent crossing obsolete before it could even begin. Hopes shifted to a promised Mark II version, equipped with new, more powerful turboprop engines. This, engineers believed, could save it. The Bristol Proteus engine promised more power, less vibration, and better fuel efficiency. The Mark II would be faster, lighter, and theoretically more economical. But the engines were plagued with problems, and airline interest had evaporated. The Proteus, like many early gas turbines, suffered from reliability issues and didn't deliver its promised performance on time. The development delays stretched on, and with each passing month, the Brabazon MKI sitting at Filton looked more and more like a relic. The state-owned carrier wanted no part of it. The dream was crumbling. The political winds had also shifted. The post-war Labour government that had championed the project was replaced by a conservative one more focused on austerity and fiscal responsibility. The Brabazon began to be seen not as a national icon, but as a bottomless pit for taxpayer money. By the early 1950s, Britain was in an age of austerity. The nation was rationing food, not building palaces in the sky. With over £6 million spent, a colossal summoned, no buyer in sight. The political will evaporate. The equivalent of hundreds of millions today had been poured into a project with zero prospect of return. In an era when families were still saving coupons for basic goods, the extravagance of the Brabazon became politically toxic. It transformed from a symbol of hope into a symbol of wasteful, out-of-touch planning. The very government that had birthed it now needed to make it disappear. In 1953, the Minister of Supply stood in Parliament and pronounced the project's death sentence. Duncan Sands, the minister, delivered the coup de grace. He acknowledged the technical advances but stated bluntly that neither civil nor military customers had any desire for the aircraft. The soul-flying Brabazon and its unfinished sibling were broken up for scrap. It was a brutal, ignominious end. The mighty machine was dismantled with torches, its aluminum melted down, its pioneering systems junked. The giant hangar and runway were all that remained. The physical evidence of this grand dream was systematically erased, as if to hide a costly embarrassment. The Filton site, however, was left with an incredible inheritance, a huge modern airfield and one of the largest assembly buildings in Europe. Yet, was it truly a complete failure? The legacy of the Brabazon is far more complex. That immense runway and assembly hall became the birthplace of later successes like the reliable Britannia airliner. The whispering giant, the Britannia, was a profitable and well-regarded turboprop airliner that owed its very existence to the facilities built for the Brabazon. Without that infrastructure, Bristol could never have built it. The advanced construction techniques, from precision machining to powered controls, became standard industry practice. The lessons learned in managing such a vast project, in forging and forming huge aluminum panels, in designing complex hydraulic systems, were not wasted. They flowed directly into the British aviation industry's bloodstream. Some even argue that the Brabazon's ambitious spirit paved the cultural runway for triumphs like the Concorde. Concorde was another technically brilliant, commercially dubious project born from national pride. The Brabazon experience, one could argue, did not deter Britain from dreaming big. It perhaps even emboldened it, teaching that the price of technological leadership was sometimes a spectacular commercial gamble. The human story within the saga is equally poignant. For the thousands of engineers, draftsmen and fitters at Filton, the Brabazon was not a white elephant. It was the pinnacle of their professional lives. They had solved problems no one had faced before. They had built something the world had never seen. Their pride in the machine was real, and its destruction was a personal loss. The chief test pilot, Bill Pegg, reportedly said flying the Brabazon was like driving a luxury carrot, was that smooth and responsive. For him and his crew, its scrapping was the loss of a magnificent flying machine. Furthermore, the Brabazon forced a painful but necessary reckoning within the British aviation establishment. It highlighted the fatal disconnect between government-led, committee planning and the harsh realities of the commercial market. It showed that building a great aircraft was not enough, yet to build the right aircraft for the right moment. This lesson, learned at such great cost, would inform future projects. The brilliant but flawed TSR-2 strike aircraft and the Concorde itself would grapple with the same ghosts. Breathtaking technology struggling against economic and political headwinds. In the end, the Bristol Brabazon stands as a majestic cathedral in the history of aviation, a structure of awe-inspiring ambition that was never occupied. It was a bridge between two eras that ultimately led nowhere. But the materials and the engineering principles used to build that bridge were later used to construct others that did. Its failure was not sterile, it was fertile. It fertilized the ground with hard lessons, advanced techniques, and a poignant reminder that progress is not a straight line. It is a winding path littered with magnificent, costly, beautiful mistakes that teach us how to walk forward. It was a magnificent wrong turn, a flying white elephant that consumed a fortune. But in its grand failure, it taught British aviation invaluable lessons about the harsh economics of the sky. The Brabazon's ghost did not haunt Filton. It tooted there. It whispered to the engineers who would build the Britannia and the Concorde. Dream boldly, but calculate ruthlessly. Build for the world as it will be, not as you wish it to remain. Its ultimate legacy was not an aircraft, but a wisdom painfully acquired, and absolutely essential for survival in the competitive, unforgiving world of global aviation. If you found this tale of ambition and reality compelling, please help others discover it by liking this video and subscribing to Winds of Thought for more stories of history as great turning points.